everyone, it's Emma here, and today I'm answering the question, why do I get cystitis during my period? So cystitis or symptoms of UTIs are never fun, but of course if we then have our period on top of that, it can be particularly troublesome. And of course, just as always, we want to try and understand a bit about why this symptom might crop up around this time. So it's not your most typical symptom of PMS or monthly periods, but there can be a connection there. So that's what I'm keen to explore. So I'm just going to run through 5 different causes or 5 different reasons why cystitis may crop up around the time that your period is due. So the first reason is changing hormone levels, and this has a lot to answer for when it comes to symptoms of periods or PMS, but it can also have an effect when it comes to your bladder and symptoms of UTIs or cystitis. And one of the main hormone changes we have during this time when your period is due is falling levels of estrogen. So estrogen is usually at its lowest points in the days before your period is due. So throughout the full second half of your cycle after ovulation, estrogen starts to drop off, and in these final days, the kind of rapid drop off to its lowest level is what then triggers your period. And then as your period starts, your estrogen levels actually start to rise. So it might actually be in the days before your period that you notice some of the symptoms even more so. So estrogen is actually a lovely anti-inflammatory in the body, which is why we really want estrogen to be in balance. Now this is generally imbalanced throughout the course of the month and relative to other hormones such as progesterone. Now estrogen will follow its natural cycle, as I say, higher in the first half of the cycle, lower in the second half. We don't really want to change that or manipulate that too much in too many cases unless there is quite a significant imbalance that we suspect there. But it can mean that at this point of drop off we become a bit more vulnerable to symptoms, those of PMS, periods, or some of cystitis in some cases. So as I say, this natural flow of hormones is quite normal, and it's not something we usually want to tamper with too much. But it might be that we then need to pay a little bit more attention to which symptoms are cropping up and how we can help support ourselves in other ways. So if there are symptoms of cystitis or UTIs bothering you, for example, then we're going to talk through some remedies you can take, some nutrients, or something like a female probiotic could perhaps be helpful if this drop in hormones is triggering infections for you. So that's just one to consider in the bigger picture in terms of the hormones. So considering the underlying hormones and then potentially what symptoms are cropping up. Next potential cause is hygiene practices. So when it comes to cystitis, hygiene practices is always a consideration because in most cases of cystitis, the cause is a bacterial infection. Now, that's not to say that periods are dirty, of course not, and this time of the month, typically our hygiene practices wouldn't change too much, but of course we have the consideration of menstrual products to consider. And again, it's not the blood or the actual period itself that is dirty or in any way going to give rise to more bacteria, but this change in hormones that we've discussed and the bleeding itself can potentially alter the pH a little bit of the vagina and those surrounding areas. The urinary tract is in very close proximity. So again, it might just be because of this drop in hormones, the changes in pH, we might just need to be a little bit more vigilant than normal. So just keeping up all your usual practices in terms of wiping front to back, thinking about your toiletries that you're using, just trying not to alter or upset your good bacteria any more than normal. And in terms of your menstrual products, just regularly changing them and not giving bacteria any other chance to thrive, because it might just be that we are a little bit more sensitive during this time. So just keeping all of those tips and points top of mind at this time. Because my next point is sex as well, and that's kind of quite closely related to the hygiene practices. So whether or not your sexual habits change around this time, again, it's just been a little bit more top of mind in terms of bacteria and where your bacteria could be getting. Again, that's what the majority of infections stem from. It's bacteria getting into your urinary tract. So tips like peeing after sex, just maybe more important than ever. So it's not that you need to change your practices at all, it's just perhaps be a little bit more vigilant during this time, because unfortunately that fall in hormones, the fall in estrogen, just makes us a bit more prone to inflammation than we would normally be. Next on my list is to consider immune function. So there is some reason to believe that your immune function may become a little suppressed around the time of your period. I've actually done a blog on this because it's quite interesting. There is some reasoning behind this, that again, with the interaction of hormones, your immune system may be affected. We also have the scenario that some symptoms of PMS and periods can look like an infection, but they're not. It's just those hormones changing. So this is just all one to consider, but it's not going to do you any harm to support your immune system or immune functions just a little bit extra at this time. So that's just considering adding in some extra nutrients such as your vitamin C, your echinacea, something like your immune support is a lovely all-rounder. It's got some herbal ingredients as well as vitamin C, vitamin D, some lovely nutrients in there to just perhaps offer you a little bit extra immune support. Remember, your immune system is responsible for detecting and fending off any bad bacteria, so you might just feel that you want that little bit of extra protection during this time. Stress is next on my list, and that stress could be having a potential effect on the symptoms of UTIs or cystitis cropping up. So stress can have a number of parts to play. Stress, for one, could be depleting your immune function, which we've just spoken about. The other one to consider is that your energy levels naturally decline as those hormones fall off at the end of the month, and you're menstruating, you're losing energy that way. But then in today's modern society, we're expected just to act exactly the same, perform, function just as normal, regardless of where we are in our natural monthly cycle. So this can create a little bit of stress as well, and fatigue, so that whole picture there. Then, depending on your PMS or period symptoms, other than those of cystitis or UTIs, if you have any cramps or fatigue in itself, any symptoms that cause you a bit of distress, or they affect how you go about your day, then that can also add to your stress levels. So there are a few different factors there. We know that stress undermines your immune system in terms of detecting that infection, but in cases of interstitial cystitis as well, stress is thought to be quite inflammatory and could be having a part to play there, even when there's not an infection necessarily at play. So now we're just going to move into talking about the different remedies. Just when we were talking there about stress and hormones, if you do suspect there's an underlying hormone imbalance which is causing your symptoms to be more severe and therefore cause you more stress than normal, then something like a remedy such as Agnus Cassis could also be helpful there. And I've also got a blog on hormone imbalance which I can tag in the description as well if anyone wants to investigate that area further. But now I'm just going to talk a bit more about the symptoms of cystitis as well. Of course, it's good to target the underlying hormone imbalance or anything underlying if you can find that. But at the time, if cystitis crops up, you might want to just focus on targeting that symptom itself. So first of all, we have our uva ursi and echinacea complex. So this combines two herbal remedies, the uva ursi, which has more of an affinity for the bladder and the urinary tract, supported by the echinacea, which is it's got your antibacterial properties and helping to support the immune system. So that's all there in one, those two herbal ingredients all in one, for a licensed product for symptoms of cystitis and UTIs. So that's definitely one to introduce quite quickly if you feel the symptoms of a UTI cystitis are starting. Just some other tips. Another product to consider for cystitis more specifically is your cranberry products. So depending on your preference, you can have a good quality wild cranberry juice with no added refined sugars, or if you're not too keen to stock up on too much juice, then the cranberry complex in a tablet form would be a nice one. And there's lots of research around cranberry for prevention of UTIs and cystitis. So again, I can tag a link to the to research on that if you're interested. Just some other tips would be to consider your caffeine intake, particularly high in coffee. That can be quite irritating, quite inflammatory for the bladder. In cases of cystitis or interstitial cystitis, actually, it's quite stress promoting as well, the heavy caffeine. And then just one more note, in terms of your period irritating your bladder quite directly. So a lot of the processes we've talked about today are kind of indirectly your hormones changing, stress, your immune function. We've covered all of that. But there is also an instance where you might suspect this is quite a direct effect, and that could be something like endometriosis. So it's just to be aware if you have any severe or persistent symptoms and you're quite convinced that as soon as your period comes it's very direct, it has a very direct effect on your bladder or urinary tract, then we would want you to investigate that further as well. So fingers crossed that has helped, and that all makes sense. Please, as always, do leave any comments or questions below and we will get back to you. Please also do subscribe to our Avogo YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon so you will be notified of any future videos. Thanks!